Out of all these women that you researched, which of these stories were your favorites?
Oh, I think Marcia Brown. Marcia, the research involved with that was just so fascinating as it unfolded. Grace and Gertrude Barker, those are two women I would have liked to know. They were sisters. They had a combined tenure of about 100 years in the Plattsburgh City School District. They started under the academy. They went to school. They both went to Wellesley College. Now, today we don't think of when your daughter says, I'm going to college, we don't think about that. There were very few places for women to go to school in the 1880s. Grace goes first. She starts teaching in a one-room schoolhouse after high school. She raises enough money. She goes to Wellesley. It didn't cost then what it costs today. It was a very different kind of school. Her education was very classical. It was Latin, Greek, that type of thing. It certainly didn't prepare you for the world. She came back and taught again. She raised enough money for her sister to go. Now, Grace came home after 2 years, and she never went back. But the money that she earned went to her sister, Gertrude, and Gertrude actually graduated, as did their younger sister. Now, that is three, and I think of Grace as a graduate of Wellesley. Those are three women who were educated at a time when women, when Gertrude graduated, there were less than 3,000 women nationally to get what we would call a BA. Less than 3,000. Their impact was so great that the yearbook is still called the Barker. And when the new high school was being built, I think it was 1964, there was a strong movement to call it the Barker High School. So, and today they're pretty much forgotten. But they were absolutely beloved. You didn't want to tangle with them, but well, I had a cousin who died at 99 and a half, and I said, so tell me about room 27. And she goes, oh my God. That was Grace's office. She was the principal. She said, you didn't want to go there.
Wow, three amazing sisters.
Yeah.
You write also about two Gold Star mothers.
Both of these boys died in 1918. They were their sons, Minnie Mayo of Rouse's Point, I think, and Abigail Kluge of Plattsburgh. Their sons died in 1918. They were not killed. They died of flu, the influenza, which really killed more World War I men than direct battle. And after the war ended, there was a very strong movement in the country to bring our boys home. There had, the War Department at some point had said, we will bring the boys home. That had never been done. There had been some instances of it during the Spanish-American War, but on a widespread level, that was not the case. And so after the war, after some time, families began to clamor. We want our boys back home. So what you have to remember is that when you died in battle, you were buried where you fell. And then once the national cemeteries were developed, then you were dug up again and you were put into the cemetery. So it sometime in the early 1920s, the government gives families two choices. You can have the boy brought home, or the husband, or the body can be interred in France or Belgium. Most people chose to keep the bodies in Europe, but as did the Mayo and Kluge family. There were other families who chose to have the bodies returned, and one of them is buried in Riverside Cemetery. It was only into the late 20s, once women started to get a voice after suffrage, that they said, we want to go to France. We want to visit our boys. And this is at the height of the Depression. The government said, okay. So it's 1933, this is 15 years after the sons die, that these women they're literally wined and dined. I mean, they get a one-way ticket, they get a round-trip ticket on a Pullman, and a person to accompany them from the military to New York, where they were put up in the best hotel. They sailed first class to Europe. They spent 2 weeks, had 3 days visiting the site. They were treated to the best food, the best restaurants. If you were black, however, you went steerage on a freighter, and you stayed at the YWCA in Harlem. Needless to say, many black women said, no, I refuse to do that. So, yeah, and so they went. And their send-off, their parties, their send-offs are like, they're having a good time. I mean, there was a whole French theme for one woman. The whole town came out to see them off at the train station. There were ceremonies in Rouse's Point in Plattsburgh. It was actually treated as almost something fun. And I suspect that enough time had passed that they had made some peace with it. And I don't know how the women responded. I don't know what they took out of it because they left no record. They would write, and one woman said, we're having a good time. And I bought a lot of souvenirs. But other than like, this is how it impacted me, I don't know.
There's a chapter on two folklorists, Marjorie Lansing Porter and Lily Mae DeLorme. Now, some folks have heard of Marjorie Lansing Porter and the work she did collecting songs and stories from the Adirondacks. Lily Mae DeLorme is an interesting character, and I won't give too much away, but when Marjorie Lansing Porter found her, she must have been in heaven.
Porter was a longtime writer for the Plattsburgh Press-Republican on historical issues. And she has a very distinctive style of writing. It's a wonderful style of writing. And at some point she acquired what we would call a tape recorder, but it was called a sound scriber. And it's actually quite large, it's cumbersome. This woman would carry it into the woods and interview loggers. One of her interviews is with a man who had been in the Civil War. And think about that. As she was interviewing people who were 100 years old, she would interview loggers and miners and anything along the lake. So the whole Champlain Valley of the Adirondacks was her front yard, backyard. She's in Lake George. I'm not quite sure why she's there. She meets this woman who is with her spinning wheel, and she's singing. And the only recorded music that we have from her is on the Tauny, Tauny, Traditional Arts of Upstate New York website. It's at the end of her life. It's it's very tinny because of the recording equipment. But yeah, she lived on the Hardscrabble Road, and she just had this wealth of songs that nobody had known about. And she was almost like, she was a folk singer, and she was basically weaving stories through song. And she recorded those. Dr. Kluge at SUNY was able to digitalize that collection, and Porter was actually recognized about 10 years ago for the work that she did in doing that. But yeah.
She recorded hundreds of songs.
Yeah. I mean, luckily it's all local at special collections here in Plattsburgh. But the Tauny webpage does have some of the things that Marjorie Lansing Porter recorded.